Okay, so we got through the first statement. I promise it's not going to get easier from here. So if you didn't follow along, probably rewatch some of those videos and really get a grasp of it. It's going to get a lot trickier from here on in. Number two statement, I'm actually going to leave this towards the latter part of the video. I'm going to walk you through an example and we can kind of see how we derive the second statement of defining cap rate. So if we have a 10% cap rate, is that better than a 5% cap rate? So I want you to think about that very carefully. Is a 10% cap rate better than a 5% cap rate? Well, if you use our previous definition, that cap rate is the rate of return if you paid in cash, you'd say, yeah, 10% is better than 5%. Of course, you'd want a 10% return over a 5% return. But it's not that simple. There are a lot more factors that go into it. We're not taking into consideration the location of the buildings. We're not taking into consideration the condition of the buildings. So typically, a 10% cap rate building would be a Class C building in most scenarios, meaning it's older, it's in a less than desirable location, and likely less reliable tenants. Compare that to our 5% cap rate building, which is returning 5% if you pay for it in cash. It's more likely to be a Class A building, maybe a brand new property or recently built in the center of the nicest area of town. So comparing those two, when you put it in that perspective, which is better now? Getting 10% on a Class C building or 5% on a Class A building? There is no correct answer. It's a subjective answer. So you really have to think about this. I like to think about it from a probability standpoint. Bear with me, I know I'm going through some progressions here and you can always rewind this video, but could be argued that even though you can get a 10% on this Class C building, let's call it, you have a higher risk of maintenance costs being higher because it's an older building. A 100-year-old building is, even if it's been well maintained, it's going to have potential for more maintenance, more things going wrong with it. Could also have a lower quality tenant base, meaning that the tenants aren't going to always pay on time. Sometimes they may not ever pay rent for one reason or another. If you contrast this with a Class A building, you're likely to have less surprises, less risk in the maintenance portion of it. And also you're probably going to have higher class paying tenants who are typically always going to pay rent on time and and in full. So really comparing those two, you'd say that the 5% cap rate, the Class A building, has a much higher probability of actually getting a 5% return, whereas the 10% Class C building cap rate may have a lower probability of actually getting that 10%. Now, you may be an exceptional manager or operator of a building, and you'll say, hey, with my operational ability, I'm going to get very close to that 10%, if not 10%. In that case, you might be more suited to that Class C building. Class A building, you're a lot more hands-off, but you're not going to get that high of return as a Class C building. So with all that said, I would like to jump into the second statement here of cap rates and what they mean from a theory perspective. So the statement is cap rates are a measure of risk. Cap rates are a measure of risk. Really, if you put it in another way, you're asking what rate of return would you deem acceptable for the amount of risk you're taking in investing in this property. So what rate of return would you deem acceptable for the amount of risk you're taking in investing in this property? So huge takeaway from this is that risk is entirely subjective. You can't quantify most of the variables in commercial real estate. There's just so many things going on. It's the perception of the owner or the prospective buyer of what is risk. Someone might see a Class C building and say, hey, I grew up in this area. I've known the building for a long time. The current owner is exceptional at taking care of things. They may deem the risk to be low, and so they would invest in that to take a higher return on their investment. So really ingrain that idea, really the two ideas, the two statements that we've come up with in the past couple of videos. The first one being that cap rates are the ROI if you paid in cash, and the second one, cap rates are a measure of risk. And with those two statements, you'll start to form the foundation of what cap rates truly mean from a theory standpoint, not just the equation we had before.